All right, let's talk about Hungary and Poland and the EU. And now it looks like the EU has figured out a workaround against the Hungary-Poland veto, the blockade. Just a refresher, Hungary and Poland decided to not vote for the 7-year budget, the EU 7-year budget. In that budget, you also have earmarked much of the funds that will go from the EU to member states in order to battle the CV pandemic. They say it's going to go to help the countries. We think it's pretty much a slush fund to help the elite and the rich. But either way, the reason I think a lot of member states are pissed off is because there's a lot of money for them to put in their pockets and to enrich themselves and their friends from this pandemic slush fund. But Poland and Hungary are not having anything to do with it, and they're vetoing it. And you can refresh people why they're vetoing it. And it has to do with the EU placing controls on Poland and Hungary. And so they don't want anything to do with it. But it looks like that Europe is now trying to figure out a workaround to get this budget passed without having Hungary and Poland's vote. So what's going on?
Well, this is so predictable and so dreary, and at the same time, in a kind of way, I suppose one has to give a bitter laugh, because here we see the EU, they're threatening to punish Hungary and Poland. They want to introduce all sorts of rules that say that Poland and Hungary can't access budget funds because of rule of law provisions that will be placed in the budgets. And of course, the implication is that Hungary and Poland are in some way breaching the rule of law. They're disregarding the rule of law. They're not playing as European democracies are supposed to play. They're not abiding by their laws. So supposedly the EU has to police them in some ways so as to keep them on the straight and narrow and the path of virtue. So what does the EU then do when Hungary and Poland veto the budget with this extraordinary provision, which they have, Hungary and Poland, have a complete legal right to do? It is in the treaties. It is absolutely clear that it's part of their legal rights. It's in the EU constitution, if you like. It's not called a constitution, but that's what it is. Well, the EU, which sets itself up as the great guardian of the rule of law, is going to find a way to get round the rule of law. It's going to try and introduce the EU budget, overriding the Polish and Hungarian vetoes. And this is now actively being discussed, apparently, in Brussels. And the way they're going to do it, or at least the way they're talking about doing it, is that they're going to have an agreement between the various member states, excluding Poland and Hungary, and they're going to try and get this budget together and these various funds together, including the slush fund, through some kind of separate treaty. Now, this is so like the EU, because what they will then achieve is exactly what they wanted right from the start. They will have an active EU budget from which Poland and Hungary are basically cut out, because they will have the budget going. They will be able to sort of send their various slush funds to various EU countries. But because the Hungarians and the Poles will have vetoed it, they will not be entitled to receive any money from the budget or from these slush funds. So it's extraordinarily cynical approach, and it's absolutely bizarre coming from people who proclaim all the time their commitment to treaties and laws and the rule of law. And it shows, by the way, the right of veto that we hear so much about in the EU actually means nothing.
Yeah, I mean, every member state has to approve everything because this is how the EU democracy works. BS. When it comes to money and when it comes to these guys enriching themselves and their friends, they're not going to let a little thing like Poland and Hungary stand in their way. So you know what's going to come next, in my opinion? What's going to come next is a full-scale media and PR campaign in Poland and Hungary to try and get some sort of regime change going. so that, you know, they're going to tell the people of Hungary and Poland, look at what your bad government has done. Look at what your bad Duda has done. Look what your bad Orban have done. Now you're not going to get any of these funds, which are being earmarked to help, you know, the small businesses that are suffering from the pandemic, and all the businesses that have gone out of business and are having trouble because of the lockdowns. That's the campaign that they're going to put forward. They're going to line the pockets of opposition politicians. They're going to pour money into the EU-friendly media companies, and they're going to make another push, as Soros has directed them, for regime change in Hungary and Poland.
That's exactly right. And of course, in Poland, as we've discussed previously in other programs, I mean, the situation is extremely divided. The country's very, very divided. And I would have thought that all of this would meet with fertile ground in Poland. I think that they will not have much difficulty finding a lot of support for this in Poland. Hungary is going to be more difficult because Orban, to be straightforward about it, is a much more convincing leader than the Polish leaders are. And also, he does have genuine support in Hungary and a solid party behind him. But there's no doubt both Hungary and Poland are going to come under incredible pressure. Now, I ought to say, in fairness, that there is some skepticism about whether this project of circumventing the veto is going to happen. There's some suggestions that some of the EU member states, some of the smaller ones, may not be happy about it because it will dilute, obviously, well, it won't dilute, it will essentially abolish their veto powers also, and they may not be keen on that. And there's also some suggestions that it might not be legal anyway, and that the Court of Justice of the European Community might strike it down. I am skeptical about all those claims. I think it will come. I think it will be done. I think if Hungary and Poland dig in their heels, we will see this attempt to circumvent the veto go forward. And I think that you will see it play out in exactly the way that you said. In other words, the veto will in effect be abolished. There will be a massive veto, media campaign against the governments of Poland and Hungary, and we will see before very long the usual protests and demonstrations in both those countries as people are mobilized there with funds and all the rest to bring the governments of those two countries down. So I'm afraid, I think the more likely scenario is the one that you've outlined. But I would say, for completeness, that there are some people who are skeptical about whether this will happen.
Wasn't Slovakia one of those states that was siding with Poland and Hungary?
Actually, I think it was Slovenia, yes. But I expect Slovenia will ultimately be ground down also. I mean, I don't think Slovenia is strong enough to hold up against the EU combine. Bear in mind that Slovenia did not join Poland and Hungary in vetoing the budget and doesn't seem to be intending to.
Yeah. All right. So this is huge news because, in essence, we've taken now the first step to abolishing the veto power of member states. And eventually, over time, if the EU holds up, which I pray it doesn't, but if it does manage to hold up, eventually, I predict that on all critical votes, you're not going to have any more member state vetoes anymore. It's going to default to this group of ruling technocrats and autocrats, or the select few big powerful EU member states, Germany, France, whatever, making all the decisions for a federated European Union.
My own personal view is that the veto has been dead for a long time in reality. I mean, this is an attempt by Poland and Hungary to revive the right to veto, which is still there in law, but it's not really been exercised in any effective way for a very, very long time. The last time anybody did it in any systematic way was way back in the 60s by General de Gaulle. And I've heard stories, I can't absolutely confirm them, that Greece, for example, when Tsipras came in, they were discovering that decisions were being made by the European Council, supposedly, of which they were not informed, and this was basically about sanctions against Russia. And they said, we weren't informed, we didn't agree, we didn't vote on these things. We might have, we would like at least to be consulted. And so when it says, that there's been a unanimous decision by the ambassadors of the member states of the EU Council to, go along with some kind of project or proposal, this isn't true, because we weren't consulted and we weren't informed, and they were basically told to get stuffed. So that's what I've heard about it, and
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. From a pretty senior source. So there we go. So you've obviously heard it also. So there we are. So I don't think the veto power really has any real practical effect, but to the extent that it still exists, it's about to be abolished.
Yeah. So in closing, when you see all these, if they're ever going to assemble together in one room, given, now that they're all doing Zoom calls, but if we ever get to a stage where they all assemble in one room in Brussels and they show the media shows those nice, images of all these guys and girls are sitting around the tables, the Merkels and the Macrons, and they're all talking to each other about these big decisions for all of Europe. It's all a dog and pony show. The whole thing is just a bunch of bollocks. The whole thing.
Absolutely. Can I just say, at the same time, European economy is in a terrible state. It's going to have the biggest contraction of any major economic unit in the industrialized, the developed world, because they're in severe depression. They've never really repaired any of the problems that were left over from the 2008 crash and the Eurozone crisis. The euro still does its devastating worst in Southern Europe. So you're consolidating a structure at the top, even as its foundations, its economic foundations, crumble at the bottom. But there is no will, clearly, to stop this. It would need concerted action by the strong powers, by countries like France and Italy. It would need a rebellion in Germany. Of that, I am afraid there's only glimmers on the horizon. This is going to go on for a very long time yet. As we've said many times on our programs, the EU has a genius for keeping the show rattling on in an integrationist direction, even as everything else falls apart.
All right, we'll leave it there. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Guys, subscribe, PayPal, Patreon, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble. Check us out there as well. And make sure you're still subscribed to the channel, because YouTube unsubscribes pretty much everybody, it seems, these days. But also go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch.
Indeed. And can I just say, you've got amazing merch now, and we've also got our exclusive products by our friend, the great Greek designer and artist, Dimitri Konomi. You can see them on our mugs. And of course, you've got lots of other mugs. We've got a mug, for example, with the flag of Great Britain here, which is, of course, the one country that has actually successfully managed to leave the EU. Well, I say successfully. There's still lots to say about that, because it's not yet finished and not yet done, but we'll see whether it happens. And you can find also amazing other products, like our amazing lines of shirts, and you'll be seeing that I'm also wearing a sweatshirt, a Duran sweatshirt, very necessary on a cold, wintry December day in London. And we got hats and hoodies and stickers and ebooks also on our shop. And please do what Alex said. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel on YouTube. Find us also on our other platforms, BitChute, Patreon, Library, and Odyssey, and support us as you can on Patreon and Subscribestar. And please also join us on our Discord server too. So, and also remember to join our next broadcast.
All right, Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Take care, everybody.